I'm here today with James W. Murphy. Jim is the author of a new book titled Faithful Giving, The Heart of Planned Gifts, which is just coming out
There
from
it is.
publishing. It's an interfaith book on starting and sustaining a planned giving program at congregations and small religious charities. Jim is also the general editor and a contributing author for Faithful Investing, The Power of Decisive Action and Incremental Change, which is an ecumenical book on socially responsible investing. And he's also contributed to 1 Minute Stewardship and We Shall Be Changed. All of these have been published by Church Publishing, Inc. Jim holds a certificate in fundraising from New York University School of Continuing and Professional Studies, an MA in Christian Spirituality from the General Theological Seminary, and a bachelor's from NYU Stern School of Business. He's a member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Philanthropic Planning Group of Greater New York, and a certified fundraising executive. Jim also manages, in his spare time amongst all the other things, he's managing program director at the Episcopal Church Foundation, where he oversees ECF's financial resource programs, planned giving, donor solutions, including ECF's donor advised fund program, and its new online fundraising resource hub, ECF 360. Active in ecumenical collaborations, he works with congregations, dioceses, and other Episcopal organizations to enhance and develop their programs and resources. You can learn more about all of this at churchpublishing.org/faithfulgiving. So Jim, it's really great to see you again, and
It's great to be
congratulations
with
on all your
you.
awesome work.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the time, Brian, and you do such incredible work. I follow you on social media and otherwise all the time. So honestly, just thank you for all the great work you're doing. Thank you.
No, thank you, but it's just a blessing for me to be able to do this stuff. So I so appreciate being able to collaborate with people like you. And as you know, I do a wide range of different types of books.
Yes,
And
you do.
I think I've done more with you on kind of the faithful giving aspect of things than anyone else. And I really love all the books and all the other work that you've done.
Well, I'm grateful for that. The last time we did an interview together, my goodness, was just about 2 years ago, shortly after Faithful Investing came out.
Exactly.
That was we still are talking about faithful investing and the importance of socially responsible investing and making the choices that are appropriate for various communities of faith. As you may remember with that book, it was a primer, but it was intentionally not trying to tell people exactly what they needed to do. It was intended so that a community of faith or a small religious organization could work together among its leadership and make decisions when it comes to socially responsible investing in that context and what was appropriate for them. There is no one single way to do socially responsible investing, just like there's no one singular way to do planned giving for a congregation or religious entity. And that has been an exciting part of expanding to the interfaith world with this new book.
So besides the stuff I mentioned in the introduction, what else would you like people to know about you?
Well, that's an interesting question. So what I'd like people to know is that I'm committed to working with congregations and religious organizations of all kinds to help empower their leaders to do the work that God's called them to do in their own particular way. And that goes far beyond the Episcopal Church. Obviously, most of my dealings are with the Episcopal Church and all of its congregations and dioceses and related entities. But it's so important, and that's really what motivated me in many ways to write this book, was that there is such a need for empowered leaders to feel confident that they can raise these special types of gifts and that they don't need to fear them, regardless of the tradition from which they come. There are many Christian churches that have foundations like the Episcopal Church Foundation, the Presbyterian, the UCC, the Methodists, ELCA, all of them have foundations like ECF, and I'm in regular contact with all of their leadership too. But even with that, individual congregations and individual leaders choose not to take action on this. And so a part of writing this book was to make leaders in a congregation of all different types of faith traditions to know that they can do this work and can move forward with it, make them feel empowered. The book also references all of the existing resources that for the denominations that wished to be listed in the book. So those are always there and always available. I don't want to make it seem as if this book is the be-all, end-all. It is a tool. It's a set of tools to help empower individual leaders, not trying to displace any of the other great work that has been done in the Christian world or in the Jewish world. I'm very excited that in this book we're able to feature the Harold Grinspoon Foundation and all of the amazing work that they have done in Jewish communities of faith all across the country. And so excited to be able to feature some really interesting case studies from the Muslim world, from Sikh and Hindu writers, and to uncover, if you will, how similar all of us are in so many ways, and that we all are being drawn into the need to raise these types of gifts, even if in some of the religious traditions that are new to the U.S., but perhaps are very ancient and have existed for many, many centuries. But they don't have these types of resources that so many Christian denominations have. And it was exciting to learn and discuss and highlight the incredible generosity that exists in many of the non-Christian traditions.
So again, this is the book, Faithful Giving.
I have a copy too.
The Heart
I
of
finally
Planned
have.
Gifts. And I mean, there's a lot of books about giving,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Why did you decide that there needed to be another one?
Well, I think there are a lot of books out there for the secular world, quite a few. When it comes to the religious sphere, there are very few. And then when you're talking about individual types of different faith traditions, there are very, very few, if any. This is the first book, I believe, written from an interfaith perspective on the topic of planned giving. I've not been able to find it. I'd love to hear about others trying to do this good work.
Well, good for you for taking
it doesn't seem that this has been something that's been addressed in this way, and in a way, right, that is not trying to replace the great resources that may be out there, but give a different perspective and a faith-based perspective, because that honestly is what is lacking in published works. There are many, many resources, template documents, and other things that can be downloaded, but perhaps they are very specific to one denomination or another. And this is intentionally very broad-based so that we can talk about the things that are common among all faith traditions, noting some of the differences, but just like the first book, not trying to prescribe that this is the only way to do it, right? There is no single way to do anything, really, in my opinion, in life. And I guess that's to go back to the question you started with, which what I want people to know is that I think I do my best to be a faithful Christian. And I think a part of that is seeking to be open-minded and willing to listen and collaborate and try and build a more peaceful and cooperative world. I do not believe that everyone has to be Christian. I don't. I believe God has made a very diverse creation, and in that diversity, there is room for different points of view and different aspects, right, that would be appropriate either within certain cultures or for certain people. I myself, I grew up Roman Catholic, but of course I have evolved, not necessarily in my theology. I think I'm still very much a faithful Catholic, But I'm also an Episcopalian and devoted to the progressive views and work that the Episcopal Church is involved in.
So as you went through all this, since you've got so many different faith traditions, so many different denominations involved
I
in this,
wanted more.
what
I wanted more. I tried. I tried.
what were some of the similarities and some of the differences that you found between groups?
So without a doubt, there are three basic things when it comes to planned giving that all faith traditions, all denominations need to do as leaders of their congregation or religious organizations. And the first is you need to be able to build a sense of trust and confidence in leadership to encourage these types of gifts, because for heaven's sakes, most of them are coming in people's estates after they have passed away. So if you haven't built that sense of trust and confidence, it's very hard to raise these types of gifts. Secondly, true among all is you need to show thanks and say thank you and demonstrate that in culturally appropriate ways. That piece may be different among different traditions, but you need to build up the relationship that you have between leadership at congregations and religious entities and those people that are going to make these kind of gifts. And you do that by saying thank you and showing that you understand how important those gifts are to the individual in that way. And finally, you need to take the steps necessary to raise awareness. You need to be able to explain to people, well, yes, just like all of your colleges and universities and all of these wonderful secular charities that do great work, just like they can all receive your planned gift, and they're talking to everyone in the pews about it. In addition to that, the leadership at congregations and religious entities have to also raise awareness so that individual donors can consider what is right for that person and their family.
So as you went through this, was there anything that was a surprise?
So maybe two answers to that. So one, in the sense of, just to follow up on what I was saying that's different, it wasn't as much of a surprise that there are differences, right? There are different cultures. There are different aspects to the culture that enable people to feel thanked, if you know what I mean. It's that's going to be different given ethnic differences, given religious differences, cultural, situational differences. So it wasn't as much a surprise, but just an affirmation that individual congregations will have their own culture. And honestly, that's quite true among all different Christian denominations.
Sure.
And so you need to know thyself, and this was a recurring theme as I know you went through the book. Know thyself first, right? Because you need to know the culture from which you're coming, whether it's your congregation, whether it's your ethnicity and religious background. All of those things inform leadership. We can share the best practices and things that we think are best to do, but you need to interpret that within your context and make appropriate choices, perhaps in timing for when you do things and exactly how. And the thanking of people in some contexts is that you need to be more public in some ways, and for other contexts, less public. And allow people, if it is their desire, to be thanked through memorializing individuals whom they loved in this lifetime. And there's a whole chapter that I wrote on this topic. So for, I guess, anything that was different and surprising would be just the tremendous generosity of other traditions within the Muslim world. I growing up in Michigan, I mean, it was, I knew many Muslim people growing up, but I didn't know until I wrote this book how incredibly generous people who follow Islam are required to be.
Mm.
Zakat is one of the pillars of Islam, and that is trying to equalize society,
Mm.
trying to make sure that no one goes without the basic needs of life. I mean, these are things that should be understandable by most Christians and others, but it's a pillar of Islam. As well, the other degrees to which you should be encouraged to give in that tradition. And one that was fascinating is something that relates to what a lot of Episcopal and other mainline denominations deal with in endowments is Sadaqah Jariyah, which is ever-flowing charity, most often seen within a planned gift, where someone who is faithful to Islam would make a gift that would be perpetually giving, either to a mosque or for a particular purpose. So that was just really, honestly, exciting to learn more about. And also to know that other traditions in Sikhism, in Hinduism, in Judaism, such tremendous generosity is built in to every tradition. And quite honestly, a lot of Christian denominations can learn a lot from understanding that level of generosity and being challenged by it,
Interesting. So, other than simply reading the book, of course,
which is a great idea.
What would be the first step that a congregation should take in creating a planned giving program?
Well, the very first step is seeking to discover if anyone has made a gift already. I mentioned this in the book. Different contexts for how you do this and what's most appropriate within many, since there are so many Christian churches listening to this interview, making sure that on your pledge card or giving device, whatever you use, that you're putting a line in there saying, please check off here if you have raised our congregation to the level of family in your estate plans. And two, a line that says, please check off here if you would like more information about planned giving opportunities. So that is just a given. It's a basic building block. But the really significant step that needs to take place is, and I've written about this in the book, I just wrote an article in at the Lake Institute that'll be coming out in a few weeks about leadership. And that is focusing on picking an appropriate leader to do this effort for the congregation or small religious charity. Unlike secular charities, most congregations rely only on volunteer leaders. And especially within the main line, some very, very busy volunteer leaders who are constantly being distracted with a number of things. And so what I recommend in the book when it comes to finding a leader, it's actually to pick two leaders. Oh, it's a big challenge, actually, that you're seeking to have two leaders who are not overly distracted with other things. So the main clergy person should not be the one selected. The treasurer, the main leader of the church, synagogue, or mosque, from a lay perspective, shouldn't be chosen. But perhaps someone who had served in a variety of those important lay roles in the past could be selected as someone who would devote some time to learning about planned giving. It isn't that it has to dominate their entire life, but they do need to learn a little bit. This book can help, as well as many other resources. But to take that initial step so that you have two people that are going to work together collaboratively to nudge this effort forward over the long term. Why do I say two people? Well, for the Christian audience out there, if you didn't notice in the New Testament in Luke, Jesus encouraged people to go out 2 by 2. I'm also encouraging, but for very practical reasons, and that is because I'm sure Jesus had the practical end in mind too, but it's because you need to have two people, because quite often planned giving efforts at a congregation or small religious charity fail because it's only one person who's doing all the work.
Mm.
And not only does that limit the sense of concepts and ideas and things to try out, it limits then what happens when that person either stops doing the work or moves on, or whatever the case might be. When you have two people, you can rely on each other. You can bounce ideas off of each other. But the key factor for maintaining that thanking relationship over the long term is by having two people in place. If one drops out, that second person can find the additional leader or can work with the other leadership to find that person. Because you do not, after doing all the work in planned giving, want the relationship to break down over time. You want the relationship between the individual making this gift and the congregation or religious entity to be maintained. And if leadership just falls out of the picture, very soon the entire process and the thanking process, which is so essential for retaining relationships and realizing that gift in time, that just needs to happen. And the best way is by having two leaders involved in this process.
It makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, as you said. So what would be like the number one thing that you want readers of the book to take away?
The number one thing, I think, is to honestly have faith in yourself as a leader. That's number one. That's why I wrote it in the way I did, with know thyself, know your constituents, and the other aspects, because this is intentionally meant for someone to teach themselves, because so many people are on their own as a volunteer doing this work. And so believe in yourself, trust yourself. You will have, as a leader of your congregation or religious entity, the best insights for the people at your congregation. You will know what can be tried and what will work and what thanking will work best. Again, you don't have to be the only one making these decisions. You can seek out other leaders and collaborate with others, but it's just really important to have that confidence in yourself first, and then be guided by the best practices that we share. I will throw out one other idea, which you didn't ask, but I just want to put it in this spot, and that is so the persons who are the leaders, make friends with and support those church secretaries. Now, of course, within a different tradition, they may be called something else. But I think the people out there know the person that I'm talking about. It's that administrative person that works for the congregation or struggles through on all the administrative work that they must do for their small religious charity. They're often doing all the data entry. They're answering the phones. They're making the letters that go out. They are seeing the letters that come in. They're doing all of that unappreciated back office work. I suggest in the book you bring them chocolates or some other appropriate cultural treat, because you need to collaborate with all of the leaders at the congregation or a religious entity, and making sure that you have that tight connection with the administrator, who's often completely unappreciated,
overlooked,
but crucial to everything you'll be doing, from finding out who has raised the parish, the congregation, to the level of charity in their estate, to the level of family, in their estate plans, as well as all of the follow-up and other important things that take place. So,
very cool. That's great advice. Great advice. So I know this book is just coming out, but
it's supposed to be out on Tuesday.
Okay. So are there any future books or other projects that you're able to talk about at this point?
There is nothing yet in the works. There is a lot that I am thinking about and considering. I mentioned in the book, because I couldn't address it, I had to focus in on what I was focusing in on, of some of the differences that people need to think about from an ethnic perspective, from a racial perspective. And those are factors that come up that are important for people to consider. I hope that my encouragement for individuals to reflect on what they know themselves about their congregation or their religious entity will help them to be guided by that knowledge and then informed by the different best practices and whatnot that we share. There's also a lot to be done within mainline Christian denominations. And I've been very active in collaborating with other denominational entities. And I hope that that will continue and that we can continue to share best practices and perhaps share ideas for how to help individual congregations face up to their own reality. Because not every congregation needs to remain as a congregation. Some do, some don't, and many need help on that. One point I try to make in the book that is when you focus on planned giving, which is all future focused, right? In many ways, you are demonstrating to the world, to the congregation and beyond that you believe in your future. You think you have a future. You're not going to be raising these kind of gifts if you think there is no future. And perhaps that can help individual congregations to have more faith in themselves, to look outside of themselves and not just be totally insular, but to seek to serve the local community and beyond so that our world can be a better place, and that these sorts of gifts that you would eventually receive will help your congregation or religious entity to serve the world more impactfully and more fully, which is what I believe God, regardless of what name we may choose to call God or the context in which we experience God, that is what we're all being called to do, to serve and help others,
Amen.
Even if they're very different from us.
Amen. Well, again, the book is Faithful Giving, The Heart of Planned Gifts. Jim, thanks so much for this and for all the work that you do. And again, everyone can find out more about all of this work at churchpublishing.org/faithfulgiving. So Jim, thanks again.
Well, thank you, Brian. And again, thank you for all the fantastic work that you're doing in your own ministry.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.